Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf on this 8th of March, International Women's Day. And I thought today I'd talk to you about some women who I find inspiring. Books by women I find inspiring, or a life of women I find inspiring. And I picked just 4 because, as you know me, I tend to babble and I wanted to keep this video under an hour. There are many more women who inspire me every day, but I picked those 4 because I thought they are well known, yes, but they don't quite get the attention, in my view at least, attention that they would deserve. So that is my subjective choice. Like I said, many more women out there who are inspiring, but I just wanted to present you with those 4. And before we start with the 4 women, I shouldn't fail to mention that, of course, today on the 8th of March, the long list of the Women's Prize for Fiction in the UK will be announced. So that's something to look forward to today. I will talk about the long list in some other video after I had a good look at it. But I will leave a link to the Women's Prize for Fiction down below, and also a link to the International Women's Day website, just in case you want to check it out and be inspired. And we go from oldest to youngest, so to speak, because the first woman was born a couple of hundred centuries ago, in this early 17th century, and that woman is Margaret Cavendish. If you're following my channel, you probably heard that name, heard me mention her before, because I mentioned her work and her life, I'm sure, in a couple of earlier videos. She was a duchess, the Duchess of Newcastle, so she was born in privilege. But at that time, of course, that didn't mean that she wasn't confined to what a woman was supposed to do. And she didn't like that, to say the least. So what I find so inspiring about her is that in the 17th century, you have a woman who ventures into male domains. She was a scientist, she was a novelist, she was an utopian writer. One of the books I want to recommend is The Blazing World and Other Writings. And The Blazing World is an sci-fi book, a utopian version of the world, where women rule and where the feminist agenda is presented in quite a witty and unusual way. So if you want to check out Margaret Cavendish, I would start with The Blazing World and Other Writings. And if you are interested in her life, I can recommend this biography, which came out in 2003 by Katie Whitaker, Madge, because, of course, the way Margaret Cavendish led her life was not looked upon with acknowledgement. She was frowned upon, to say the least, and she was considered mad. She died young, when she was only 50, because she died in 1673, so she was only 50 years old. But I find it inspiring, certainly in our time, that even in the 17th century, there were women who didn't stay within the confines of the female agenda, the way the female life was supposed to be, even a very privileged female life. And I always find it inspiring to read about women who just, stepped across boundaries and did something else with their life. So Margaret Cavendish is certainly an inspiration even for women today after all this time. And if you want to read more, I can recommend this biography, but also Margaret Cavendish's own writing, The Blazing World, especially. Check her out and see what you think. Of course, as always, I will leave the names of the women and the titles of the works I mention down below in the description box. And don't worry, we won't go century by century, but we'll make a big jump now from the 17th century right to the beginning of the 20th century. And the second woman I want to talk to you about is Martha Gellhorn. Martha Gellhorn was an American journalist, novelist, And she is most famous, I think, now for her ill-ending relationship with writer Ernest Hemingway, which is a shame because she has a body of work worthwhile remembering in her own right. This is a very good biography by Carolyn Moorehead, which came out a couple of years ago. But let me tell you a little bit more about Martha Gellhorn first. She was born in 1908 in the United States, and I think she is rightly considered one of the best war correspondents and war journalists of the 20th century. She traveled extensively, and she traveled to war areas even more extensively, and she has written, I would say, almost a dozen or maybe 24 books about her experiences traveling, but also as a war correspondent. I will leave links to 2 books by her down below. The one is The Face of War, and the other one is Travels with Myself and Others. So if you've never heard of Martha Gellhorn, I'm sure you will find her very interesting and I think inspiring, because I have the same with her that I had with Margaret Cavendish, about whom I talked just now, a woman who, went across the boundaries, because in the early 20th century, you can imagine, it was not considered normal, quote unquote, for a female journalist to be a war correspondent. And I think it's especially saddening for me that Martha Gellhorn now, like I said earlier, is only known because she had a relationship with Ernest Hemingway. So you should read her biography. It's an inspiring, fascinating read to read about her life. And unlike Margaret Cavendish, she had a long life. She died when she was 90. And you should also maybe check out, if you find that interesting, her war books, like In the Face of War, or her travel journals. And if you Google her, you will find her work, and most of it is thankfully still in print. The third woman I want to talk to you about is a journalist, a Russian journalist called Anna Politkovskaya. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. She was born in 1958, and she was most famous for her books about the war in Chechnya. I will leave one of the books down below, A Small Corner of Hell, which was published in 2002. That actually was her second book about the war in Chechnya. She was a very brave woman, critical about the regime. She wrote also a book about Putin's Russia. And sadly, she was murdered in 2006. When returning home, she was murdered, gunned down in her elevator when going up to her apartment. There was a trial in 2008, 2009 with a retrial. 4 men were convicted of her murder, but to this day it's still unknown who actually paid those 4 guys to murder her. She was, like I said, critical of the regime. She received death threats numerous times. There was an attempt on her life earlier when she was poisoned, but she survived that. So she is an exceptional, or she was, I sadly have to say, she was an exceptional woman, exceptionally brave, but also a very good journalist. So I think she is worthwhile reading, certainly if you're interested in Russia and the Chechen War. But also her last book is called The Russian Diary. This is, don't get scared, this is the Dutch edition, but it has been translated into English, of course, and that's her last book. It was published in the year of her death in 2006, and it's a very personal diary right up until the murder. So if you've never heard of her, I think she is certainly somebody you should read for anybody interested in Russia, but also as an inspiration of a very brave woman journalist. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there are several documentaries made about Anna's life, one of which, Anna 7 Years on the Front Line. I will leave a link down below because you can watch it on YouTube. And the last woman I want to talk to you about, who I find inspiring and inspiring still, because she's the only woman still alive. I mean, not the only woman still alive, but the only woman I talk about who is still alive. And that is Diane Athill. And she turned 100 in December last year. So obviously she was born in 1917. She's an editor. I can recommend her biography about an editor's life, Stet, which was published in 2000. She is a very unconventional woman as well, personally, but also professionally. She edited in her long life as an editor, you know, a wave of really famous authors. But what I found interesting, of course, about her is not only that she's so old, but the way she approached her life in a very unconventional way, the way she decided what to work, but also how she approached her personal life. So she is an extremely interesting character. And her memoir, Stet, if you're interested in the life of an editor, but she wrote multiple memoirs. One of her later ones is this one, somewhere towards the end when she turned 90. She wrote this one, and her last one was published 2 years ago in 2016. So if you're interested in bookish women, in the life of bookish women and unconventional bookish women, then Diane Athill is certainly somebody you should check out. Her memoirs about her life, but also about writing. I'll show it again. Stet, this one about an editor's life. I find her very inspiring. The way she talks about her work, the way she approaches editing, but like I said, also the way she approaches her personal life. So, these were 4 women I find inspiring to inspire you on International Women's Day. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know whether you are interested in reading about or by books by any of the women. I'm babbling again. Or whether they are women you find particularly inspiring. I'm curious to know. And I'll see you all soon in my next video. Bye-bye.